Mr. Mayor, we're live.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Clerk. I'd like to welcome everybody to the first council meeting of 2024. I hope everyone had a peaceful and enjoyable holiday break. I'll begin the meeting with the land acknowledgement. The Township of Oro-Medonte acknowledges that we are situated on the traditional land of the Anishinaabe people and ancestral territory of the Huron-Wendat. The Anishinaabe include the Odawa, the Ojibwe, and the Potawatomi, nations collectively known as the Three Fires Confederacy. It continues today as the home for diverse Indigenous people, including the historic Métis community in Penetangwishí. The Anishinaabe people continue to have an enduring relationship with this land, specifically the Chippewas of Rama First Nations, the Chippewa Tri-Council, and the Williams Treaties First Nations. The Huron-Wendat Nation also continues to pay respect and protect their ancestors and heritage on this land. We honor the Indigenous history and culture that has thrived for millennia in this territory and the treaties that bind us together as partners in the spirit of the shared sustainable and prosperous future. We are all treaty people. Our commitment begins with acknowledging the truth so that we can move forward together towards reconciliation. Madam Deputy Clerk, may we have a motion to adopt the agenda, please?
Moved by Clark, seconded by Hutchison. It be resolved that the agenda for the council meeting of Wednesday, January 10, 2024 be received and adopted.
All in favor? That is carried. And may we have a motion to go past 4 hours if necessary, Madam Clerk?
Moved by Young, seconded by Bard. Be it resolved that Rule 14.20A, as per the procedural bylaw number 2023-043, be suspended in order to allow the meeting to proceed past the 4-hour adjournment requirement if necessary.
All in favor? That is carried. And are there any pecuniary interests to disclose at this time by members of council? Seeing none, may we have a motion to go into closed session, Madam Clerk?
Moved by Lavoie, seconded by Clark. Be it resolved that we do now go into closed session at 3:03 p.m. to discuss labor relations, employee negotiations, staffing update.
Okay. All in favor? And that is carried. We'll see everyone in closed. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, we're live.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Clerk. May we have a motion to rise from closed session, please?
Moved by Bard, seconded by Shell. Be it resolved that we do now rise at 3:30 p.m. and report on closed session item 4C.
All in favor? That is carried. And may we have a motion for item 4C?
Moved by Hutchison, seconded by Bard. Be it resolved that the confidential verbal information presented by Robin Dunn, CAO, re Labor Relations, Employee Negotiations, Staffing Update be received.
All in favor? That is carried. And may we have a motion for the 4 sets of minutes?
Moved by Shell, seconded by Hutchison. Be it resolved that the draft minutes of the Traffic Safety Advisory Committee meeting held on Monday, November 27, 2023 be received, and that the draft minutes of the council meeting held on Wednesday, December 13, minutes of the special council meeting held on Wednesday, December 20, and minutes of the council meeting held on Wednesday, December 20, 2023 be received and adopted as printed and circulated.
Thank you, Council. Is there any amendments to those minutes that anyone had? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. May we have a recognition? We have a recognition of achievements today. The Canadian Association of Certified Planning Technicians regarding Paul Zhao, GIS analyst recipient of the 2023 Merit Award of Geometrics. I want to take this chance to congratulate Paul on his achievement. This is the second award Paul has received for all his outstanding work. So, well, there he is there. You know, we could let you, if you'd like to, you can come up and give like an acceptance speech if you'd like, Paul, but thank Well, thank you very much for all the hard work, and it's great to see that the amount of recognition you've received from multiple organizations towards what you've done. So thank you very much.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, is there a motion in regards to that, please?
Yes, moved by Young, seconded by Clark. Be it resolved that 1, the correspondence dated November 20, 2023, from the Canadian Association of Certified Planning Technicians, CACPT, re Paul Zhao, GIS analyst, recipient of the 2023 Merit Award, Geomatics, be received. 2, that Paul Zhao, GIS analyst, be recognized under the mayor's signature.
All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you very much, and congratulations, Paul. Your efforts are greatly appreciated.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, so now we're on to item 8, which is deputation presentations. Jacob Hanlon will be presenting via Zoom. Is Jacob with us right now? There he is.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, we can, Jacob. So please proceed when you're ready.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. I'll just start by saying thank you very much for having me on this afternoon. I'm here to present just some information to you about our waste diversion program here that's really been expanding across Canada. So with that being said, I appreciate you taking the time to host me. And if we can move on to the next slide here, that would be great. So I'll just speak about a little bit about our company here just to start. So Food Cycle Science is a Canadian company. We're based out of Ottawa, and we are 100% focused on food waste diversion solutions. So we do this using our technology, which is the Food Cycler. It's an in-home food recycler, and while it is sold direct to consumers through some partnerships with companies such as Vitamix, we also put a lot of energy and efforts towards putting food cyclers into classrooms with some partnerships with Eco Schools Canada, for example, and then into municipalities as well to help with additional organics diversion. Next slide, please. So our municipal solutions help many small, rural, remote, and northern communities, as well as larger communities across Canada, keep food waste out of their landfills. We're currently working with over 115 Canadian municipalities across 9 provinces and 2 territories, including about 16% of Ontario municipalities who either face some struggles with food waste management, where curbside organics collection is not an option, or where they do have curbside and it's not hitting that participation rate that the municipality is looking for. Not too far from Oro-Medonte, we have programs in Parry Sound, Georgian Bluffs, across Bruce County, and then in many of Peterborough County's lower tiers as well. I'll be very clear here that I am aware that Simcoe County takes care of your waste management and that you do have curbside organics collection. I'm not here trying to replace any of that in any way, and I'll expand on this more as we go through the PowerPoint, but in short, our program is definitely a great complement to existing organics programs to really help boost participation. Next slide, please. So I won't take too long to talk on the issues here, but the major problem with food waste is it is avoidable. It accounts for a large portion of our household waste, and it is made up of mostly liquid, which makes it unpleasant to deal with. It can be heavy and freezes in the wintertime, even in that curbside green bin. So on top of that as well, when we put food waste in the garbage, unfortunately, when it does end up there and it goes to the landfill, it is responsible for generating some pretty harmful greenhouse gases. And I don't need to emphasize too much that all these factors make it so that food waste is a problem that has a pretty strong municipal impact. Next slide here, please. So if we look at the various impacts that food waste has, since it takes up a large portion of our waste stream, it is causing landfills to fill up quickly. Obviously, with your curbside program, we're not too worried about that, but I mean, depending on what participation looks like, we definitely want to keep organic waste out of the landfill and extend the lifespan of our landfills for as long as we can. When we look at the environmental impact, when it does end up in the garbage or in places where it's not being processed effectively, it's typically in an anaerobic environment, squished between tons and tons of waste. And when food waste is in that environment, it ends up producing methane gas, which is quite a bit more harmful than the normal CO2 that it would create during its breakdown process. And then when we look at our communities, putting food waste in the garbage and even in that curbside bin, it can definitely attract some animals, definitely can attract bugs. And we've all had, I think, flies laying their eggs in our green bins in the middle of the summer in the heat. So it can definitely be just a little unpleasant to deal with as humans. So when we do, manage our food waste effectively, not only do we eliminate it from going to the garbage, reduce the volume that is going through the garbage stream in the landfill, and we can overall make it a much more pleasant process for the municipality, the county, and residents as well. Next slide here, please. So we often get asked the question, isn't this problem solved already? Obviously, there are curbside green bins. They are a great solution in densely populated areas and places that have the infrastructure for it. When we look at backyard composting as well, another great solution, a great complement to existing solutions as well. I think, unfortunately, backyard composting isn't necessarily feasible for everybody. It's certainly not a year-round solution as well with our harsh winters, and there's still the concern about bears and other animals. And then when we look at that other kind of option there, which we try to avoid, but it's typically the easiest solution for residents who don't like any hassle, and it's to continue putting organic waste in the garbage. And it ending up in the landfill. And as I touched on there, the long-term impacts here are quite costly and harmful to the environment. In a perfect world, 100% of our residents would keep their food waste out of the garbage through a variety of solutions, but unfortunately, this just isn't the reality. And this is where having complementary programs like the food cycle program, like backyard composting, can help bridge the gaps in organics participation. I'll just quickly use an example here. Up in Ottawa, we've had our curbside green bin for about 15 years now, and our participation rate in that curbside program is still only at about 58%. I think it goes to show that there's definitely an appetite for various programs, and there is no one size fits all to achieving that 100% participation in terms of organics. Next slide here, please. I just want to give a bit of a depiction here on what the food cycler is. So in case you're not familiar with the technology, We typically frequent the FCMs and the AMO trade shows. So if you have seen us there, that's great. I hope we're a familiar face, but this is what the Food Cycler looks like. I know a lot of the times they are spoken about as countertop units, but what's great about the Food Cycler is all you need is a plug. It can go anywhere in your house or even in your garage or a laundry room. And it essentially will process your food waste and turn it from raw food waste in an overnight process, typically 8 hours or less. It'll reduce it by about 90% in volume and weight. And what comes out of there is a very clean, odorless, almost soil-like byproduct. We typically compare it to a fertilizer where it can definitely go right into your garden and help with your plant growth if you are interested in gardening and have that landscaping going on your property. But if it does end up in a backyard compost bin or the curbside green bin, it's just greatly reduced in that quantity, and it's a much cleaner and odor-free and dry product or byproduct to be putting in there. Can you go on to the next slide here, please? So this is the Food Cycler product family, and this is what we put into our municipal programs, which I'm going to dive into more here in the next few slides. But essentially, we've listened to what residents have to say, and we have two options here. We have a 2.5 liter capacity unit on the left and a 5 liter capacity unit on the right. Both of them process food waste in 8 hours or less, and they both contribute to really making the process of dealing with your household food waste just a lot cleaner and a lot more pleasant. Next slide here, please. Just to give a depiction of kind of before and after with the Food Cycler. So you put in your food waste, you click the button before you go to bed, you wake up in the morning, and you have about, as I mentioned, a 90% reduction in food waste. Just wanted to provide this visual to kind of complement the description I'm giving. I think it always helps to see that it's greatly reduced, and as a resident, it's very much a more pleasant process. But also as a hauler or as a municipality that's in charge of collection and everything like that. I mean, collection can become a bi-weekly thing. Garbage collection can be reduced as well if something like this is a program that's being integrated where residents no longer have any food waste going to their garbage because they're pre-processing it. If we move on to the next slide here, that would be great. Just to look at the different beneficial uses of that byproduct. I'm not going to go through all of these because I think I touched on quite a few already, but that byproduct, it is full of nutrients, and a lot of residents do like using it in their home garden. It can also be added to a backyard composter, local farm, community garden, and then, as I mentioned there, can go into that curbside green bin as well. Next slide, please. So when we look at the economic impact of the Food Cycler program compared to kind of the more traditional waste management collection program, especially as complementary solutions here. The Food Cycler program it's quite simple, it's quite efficient, and I mean, it's affordable for residents, it's affordable for the municipality, and we'll get to that kind of the cost of the program a bit later on here. But just when we compare it, whether it's used as an addition to an existing program or kind of to tackle that multi-residential state, let's say for apartment buildings who don't get the curbside organics, it's really a very simple process. There's no labor, there's no trucking, there's no infrastructural costs. It's just essentially putting a Food Cycler into the homes of residents and letting them pre-treat and pre-process their food waste there. Next slide, please. About 5 more before I wrap up. In terms of our existing partnerships and our programs, we've had a lot of success, and I'll touch on it in the next slide here as well, but we've really found that residents are quite interested in solutions such as this. I mean, I touched on our example with Ottawa here with our low curbside participation. A lot of residents don't necessarily enjoy using their green bin or by putting raw food in it in that kind of smelly, liquidy state. It's just not the most pleasant process, and that honestly diverts a lot of residents from using their curbside program and kind of reaching that effective participation rate. So with the Food Cycler, you really get to make the whole process cleaner for your residents, allow them to just make it more enticing and more pleasant for them to deal with the organics. And it really targets a lot of those residents who aren't using existing services and programs like a backyard bin or a curbside bin. So a really good way to effectively achieve participation. Next slide here, please. So I mentioned that we are working with over 115 Canadian municipalities. Just to briefly touch on some of the results from these programs. So we've wrapped up pilot programs in over 50 of them, and we have data from over 6,000 households on how the program has gone for them. I won't touch on every stat here, but when we look at the net new diversion there, that second one from the bottom, 300 kilograms per year of food waste per household is the estimated diversion that we've gotten from the data collection. And I think that's a really important stat when we look at it as net new. These residents are answering in the surveys saying that before this program, they were putting their food waste in the garbage. And I think no matter what programs are available, there are always a number of residents who are doing that. And there are just, they find that with this program, it's made it easy and it's encouraged them to actually divert the organics. That participation rate number at the top is the other one I want to focus on. 98% of residents who have enrolled and participated in these food cycler programs are claiming that they're going to continue using the food cycler as their either sole or as a complementary part of their diversion solution for organics moving forward. I think it's really encouraging. Again, to go back to that Ottawa example, 98% is really unheard of in other organics programs. If we just skip ahead 3 slides here, that would be great. Perfect, thank you. So I just want to touch on the, for the sake of time, the pilot program structure here. This is our traditional pilot program where we have essentially a 12-week program where residents will purchase their food cycler at the subsidized rate. They'll use it for those 12 weeks. We send them out a survey to collect the data. We put all that back into a final report, and we present that back to you in a future council meeting. And we think it's really important to show you the success of your program and what your residents' views are on the pilot. And then from there, we can use that information for future waste management decision-making for the municipality. But to look at the cost structure here, we have that retail price there at the top. We put in our own food cycler municipal discount for these programs, and then you see that Impact Canada investment line there as well. That's some federal funding that we have from Agri-Food and Agriculture Canada. Essentially, we've been awarded a substantial grant to go towards these programs from the federal government, and we've been investing that to ensure that residents can have access to this technology and this solution at a very reduced price. So moving on with that structure here, you look at that municipal subsidy in that second last line of $100 per household. In summary, the municipality is paying per household $100 as a one-time fee to then have those residents access this machine at that reduced cost of $150 or $300 for the larger machine. And again, that's a one-time cost for the resident as well. And with that municipal subsidy, obviously up front, that may seem like a lot if you're looking at 100, 200, 500 households, but really you're getting that cost back in waste savings and in increased participation and less tonnage that's going in through your garbage stream. And typically that payback period is about 2 to 3 years, and then from there it's just straight savings from the reduced tonnage. Next slide, please. So second last one here before I wrap up, just some pilot size recommendations. Again, I understand that the county does manage your waste, and this is a presentation that we will be working to have with the county as well, but we do think it's important to share this information with the lower tiers to gauge interest on that note as well. Essentially, the smallest pilot program that we offer is 50 households. Typically that's reserved or opted in for by municipalities who are just looking to collect some data and see if it's a program that works well for them. Again, obviously based on your population size, we'd recommend one of the larger programs, probably around 200 households if this is something you're interested in. But ultimately it's up to your needs, your budget. If you have kind of climate action fund or anything or any grants in that sense that you'd like to put towards a program like this, we're happy to adapt that program size and scope for you. Moving on to the next slide here, I know that you have a copy of this, so I'm not going to go through all of these points here, but just some partnership benefits and reasons that may resonate as to why you should consider this program. I think I touched on quite a few of them, so I won't go through them here, but again, increasing that participation, giving your residents a complimentary program to help increase their participation in the curbside program, and overall just keep their food waste out of the landfill and reduce that environmental footprint. So with all that being said, we can move on to the next slide here. I'd just like to say thank you very much for listening to the presentation. Again, I'm just here to provide this as information for you. I'm sure we'll see some of you at the upcoming municipal conferences in 2024 here. I'm just asking that you receive this presentation as information. If there is interest in pursuing more information or a potential partnership, I just ask that you refer us to a staff member to put together a recommendation and a report for council. So thank you very much, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hanlon. Council members, do you have any questions or clarity in regards to this? Deputy Mayor Lavoie?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Hanlon. That was a very interesting presentation. I have two questions and perhaps a suggestion. Have you calculated in your greenhouse gas reductions what the haulage contribution would be? That would be one question. And this is just for your own, and maybe you have a different presentation for staff, and that's why you're not presenting it to council. And the second question is there a number on a per household basis that you have that would indicate to first tier government what the reduction in cost would be as opposed to picking up curbside? Thank you.
Thank you very much for the questions, and those are definitely some in-depth questions where we would want to have kind of sit down with a staff member, get the proper information in terms of your costs per hauling and cost per household for curbside, and put that together in more of a report and more of a structured answer with some calculations in there. In terms of your first question there, do you mind just clarifying a little bit in terms of the cost for the hauling? Is that in terms of getting the units to the municipality, or is that more the hauling of the byproduct?
Yes, thank you. That's the hauling of the byproduct. In other words, if they didn't have to pick up the green bin, how much money would the Tier 1 municipality save? And I say this because Simcoe County is contemplating not picking up the garbage bin if there's not a green bin next to it in order to increase participation. So thinking ahead, that would mean that a household who had this program active in their household would have to be registered. So when they read the barcode of the pickup bin of the garbage, they would know that they could pick it up because the resident was participating in this program. Without getting into any further detail, if you want to contact me, I could perhaps suggest someone at the county who you could discuss this with you. You haven't already had that conversation with Simcoe County. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I really appreciate that clarification, and I would absolutely love to continue that discussion with yourself and with a member of the county as well. And I guess the one main thing I'll say about that kind of, I guess, tactic with not picking up garbage unless there's a green bin, absolutely, if there was the option for residents to either have a backyard compost bin, a curbside green bin, or a food cycler, and it was within that barcode on the bin that they were participating in one of those three programs, I mean, essentially adding, let's say, clear bags to that as well, so you can see that there's no food waste in the bags. To take that a step further, I mean, those are the types of solutions that really would go a long way in that. I think it's great that the county is looking at implementing that, because it's these multiple kind of avenues and tactics all at once to address this issue that can go a long way. So yeah, I would love to be connected with yourself and with a member of the county as well, if we could manage to do that, over email in the future. That would be fantastic.
Perfect. Well, thank you. Councillor Hutchison.
Thank you, Mayor Greenlaw, and thank you, Jacob. A really interesting presentation, and just a simpler question than Deputy Mayor's. I think the participation rate is a number that we would want to know from the county as to how things are going here in Oro-Medonte. I've heard anecdotally that we have a fairly good participation rate in the green bin program within our township. I will say my husband and I have a food recycler at our cottage property because there is no garbage pickup there at all. We're on an island property, so we became very aware of how much garbage we were taking out and how much of that was food waste. So we have the Vitamix unit, which we've used now for about 3 years. And I would say it really is a terrific thing to have. If you are, for us, we're in a situation where we were really conscious of trying to divert that food waste out of the landfill. So it goes into our gardens at the cottage, but it really is a terrific product if somebody is interested in doing that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And I will just mention on that note that especially where you're geographically located and that there are definitely a number of cottagers there, if it's a program that's tailored for residents who don't get curbside or who aren't, within the serviceable areas, that is something that on our end we've done in the past municipalities where within the sign up page, we're able to filter it based on postal code or based on what region of the municipality they're in. So it is a program that we can tailor extremely finely as well to be reserved for residents who don't necessarily have an option for collection or for diversion at that point, such as cottagers. So I appreciate the comments and I appreciate the perspective there as well.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bard?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. Not to put you on the spot, maybe I'll just give you a heads up and then I'll communicate with Deputy Lavoie, but I'm looking more for a breakdown. You said 300 kilogram diversion. I'm assuming that's from a household that doesn't use a green bin at all. And I would think that most of the people that would buy into this are people that use green bins already. So I'd like to see sort of that diversion from people that are already using a green bin with that savings in the haulage and the footprint of driving the trucks around and things like that. So that's just some of the thoughts that I have, and I'll pass that on to Deputy, and then you can communicate through him.
Perfect. Thank you. And Councillor Clark?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to council to provide some clarity. I think County of Simcoe, so not specific to Oro-Medonte, but County of Simcoe is probably top 10 in the province in terms of green bin usage, which is fantastic. To Councillor Bard's comments, one of the benefits of a product like this is not only are you saving, you're not really saving on the curbside collection because the truck is actually multifaceted. So it picks up the garbage and the green bin or the recycling in the green bin. So the truck is still going to drive by, but you also save the haulage from the transfer facility to the processing facility. There was talks of the County of Simcoe to put a organics processing facility within its own boundaries, because I think right now it's shipped to, I want to say, the Orangeville area. So if you think about that, the organics that you're putting in your green bin end up traveling 200 kilometers in a semi-inefficient vehicle, generating a lot of greenhouse gases from the transportation perspective. So from an overall perspective, this makes a lot more sense. Those are the only comments I think that I wanted to add.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Schell?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Greenlaw, through you to Jacob. I'm not sure if I missed it. We were talking about the municipality and the county now. The county is responsible for our waste collection and our sites. Is the county interested in getting involved with this project to help the municipalities?
Thank you very much for the question. And we have not approached the county yet. In our past experiences, when programs have eventually happened at the county level, there's typically been a municipality or two in the lower tiers that have either started the program at a small scale within their own municipality, or they've at the very least expressed interest to the county. And so our kind of, I guess, strategy there is just very least, and doing what I'm doing today, is just bring information to the lower tiers and ensuring that they're aware that the program exists and its benefits before we do go to the county.
Thank you. And the deputy would like to add a comment to that.
Yeah, sorry, I should have been clear. Myself and the mayor, as the deputy, I sit on county council. So in reference to Councillor Schell's comment, it's in that role that I'm making that offer.
Okay, fair enough. Perfect. Any other comments or questions for clarity at this time? Seeing none, I guess one thing I'd like to know, are there any other incremental costs as far as the maintenance of the unit, as far as filters that need to be changed out or anything like that? Like how would that be, who would encompass those costs, and how does that work within your project?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So the only, I guess, consumable slash maintenance aspect of the machine is there are carbon filters. Those filter out any odors from the process of the food waste being, I guess, processed in the machine. It would obviously be quite smelly with the heat involved and the grinding and everything of the food waste. So, yeah, there are carbon filters. It's essentially activated charcoal that filters out the odors. We make them as available to residents as possible in terms of we have an online portal that most residents in our municipal programs will go to, and for about $20 per filter change, and you're looking at about 3 to 4 changes per year. So an overall cost for maintenance for the machine would be $60 to $80 per year, and all that is very accessible for residents through our online portal. That's if they want to change the filters. Some people who leave the machine in the garage, they don't necessarily change the filters, and the odors aren't that unbearable in any way. If it's in a laundry room or a garage, you can definitely go without the filters and it operates the exact same way. I will mention that our citywide program that's being implemented in the city of Nelson in British Columbia, about 5,000 households there that are each and every one of them are, the timeline is they're going to have a food cycler by the end of this year. We already have a couple thousand with food cyclers right now, and that's their citywide organics program. They have at a couple local grocery stores filter refill stations. That cost is being covered by the city, and essentially residents can just go and refill their filters at those grocery stores when they're going for their grocery trips. And again, it's about a 3 to 4 month period that your filters would last. So definitely several options there where residents can handle that cost on their own, or can come through the city, or kind of anywhere in between.
Oh, perfect. Thank you very much for that. Thank you very much. Oh, sorry, one more question, Councillor Young.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of questions. What is the biggest complaint about these units from the public? Those people that have a unit in their residence, what is the biggest complaints, or are the biggest complaints?
That's a very good question, and you know what, I appreciate you asking that. I will say about a year and a half to 2 years ago, the biggest complaint would have been that it's too small. For families of 3 or more, they complained that the unit just didn't have enough capacity for the daily amount of food waste that they would generate. So about a year ago, last January, we released the larger unit, that 5-liter unit that I had mentioned. And so that, in our eyes, that addressed the biggest concern, which was the overall capacity. And in our programs, we've now had the larger unit, the Eco 5, distributed and implemented in households for about a year now, and really the results have been fantastic. Households of 3 or more find that the capacity is great, and for the smaller households who are still using smaller machine, they find that works well for them. To be honest, I wouldn't say there's a single pressing concern apart from that one in the past. I do know that some residents, just because it's a newer solution, it's a newer technology for them, there's a bit of a learning curve. There's some, it really varies. If they live in an apartment building, for example, they might have a concern about the space. To address that, we actually have our even smaller unit. It's a 3-liter unit that's being released about mid this year. That's been engineered and designed for apartment buildings and for small spaces. And that will be implemented into our municipal programs this year as well. But I wish I had a more clear kind of top 3 in terms of complaints, but overall, and if requested, I can definitely share the compiled kind of survey data from our 6,000 plus results and the comments that come with it. Overall, most residents are quite happy with the experience and with the machine.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, Mr. Hanlon, thank you very much. A great presentation, very informative, and I'll leave it to you and the deputy to contact after the meeting to look at things moving forward with the county. Okay. And Madam
Okay,
Clerk,
thank you very much. I really appreciate your time, Mayor and councillors and members of staff, and have a great rest of your day.
you as well. Madam Clerk, Deputy Clerk, will we have a motion to receive that information, please?
Yes, moved by Bard, seconded by Lavoie. Be it resolved that the deputation provided by Jacob Hanlon Food Cycle Science Municipal Food Waste Diversion Program be received.
All in favor? And that is carried. So this brings us to our second presentation by Byron Tan, Manager of Watson and Associate Economics, regarding the 2024 development charges council workshop. Mr. Tan, there you are. You can proceed when it's convenient for you, sir.
Hello, good afternoon, members of council. Not sure if there was any other, opening remarks from the finance team or any of the senior management, but I'm happy to begin my presentation, when instructed.
Yep, just give me one. Is there any comment from senior management or finance?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. No, I would like Watson to do their presentation. It's going to give you a great overview of what we've been doing with the DC study.
Perfect, thank you, Nellie. So Byron, whenever you're ready, please proceed.
Perfect. And I am sharing my screen, so please let me know when you can see that.
Yep, we can see it, thank you.
Perfect. So thank you, members of council. As mentioned, my name is Byron Tan. I'm a manager here at Watson and Associates, and we've been working with township staff to undertake the 2024 development charge background study. This process right here in this presentation is meant to provide you with an overview and a status update as to where we are currently and how we are proceeding through the study and potential timelines that we are trying to adhere to over the coming months. So again, this presentation is more just to provide you a background. For those of you that are familiar with development charges, this should be a refresher. For those that are new to the world of development charges, hopefully there's enough information in here that helps guide you through the process that we have to undertake, as well as the rationale for having such a charge. So without further ado, again, the purpose is just to provide you with the timelines. I'll go over some of the the legislative requirements as part of the Development Charge Act. And then we'll go through again briefly on the methodology, and then we'll finally get into some of the specific policies that are occurring within Oro-Medonte. We'll take a look at the growth forecasts that we'll utilize for the study, as well as your current rates. What policies do you currently have in place? Discussions as to with staff whether we maintain those policies, or if there are any amendments that need to be undertaken prior to council's consideration of the new bylaw. And then I'll provide you with a comparator survey between yourselves and other municipalities, namely the municipalities within your area. If there are any other municipalities that you'd like to add to the list as a comparator, I'd be more than happy to do so during the next meeting. But for now, this is a similar municipal comparator that we had provided in prior DC studies. And as I'm going through the presentation, I mean, if there's any questions, feel free to ask. I'm not sure whether the method here is to wait until the end of the presentation, but chances are, if you have a question, I may be answering it in a subsequent slide, so it would be a good segue. But if you do have anything that's pressing on your minds, please feel free to ask, and I'm more than happy to answer those questions at that time. So with respect to the timelines of the DC study, we were engaged with the township in July of last year. And, this is where we started putting together all of the data collection. We took a look at some of your historical information, as well as looking at future capital budgets that would be required in order to service the new developments and new growth that would be coming to the township. So most of that information is still ongoing. We are on the latter half of that analysis, and we should be able to prepare some draft calculations and findings within the coming weeks. So as of right now, in January 10th, we're having this council workshop. But shortly after this meeting, we should be able to start formulating some of these calculations and prepare the findings for the township's considerations. Subsequent to that, we will be finalizing the background study, hopefully in the spring of this year. Your bylaw right now doesn't expire until October of 2024. So we are just trying to get ahead of the curve and not put everything to the last minute. And then that way, if there are any significant changes, at least, you know, the township has the ability to react before waiting until the last possible moment on a deadline. And with that being said, you know, after the release of the background study, we will have the mandatory public meeting, which is mandated under the Development Charges Act. And then anytime between the release of the study and as long as 60 days pass between the release of the background study, we can have the bylaw consideration at any point in time after that waiting period. So with that being said, just as a quick recap, development charges, I mean, they're not new. It is a revenue tool to allow municipalities to recover capital costs associated with residential and non-residential growth within your municipality. Now, these costs would be in addition to what you would normally require as part of a subdivision agreement. So for example, if you were to have, let's say, a new development come into play, typically the local developer would be responsible for constructing the local roads, local water mains, sidewalks, street lights, etc. So really the development charges are meant to capture more the broader costs. So, you know, as soon as that development is constructed, naturally those individuals, you know, with vehicles would have to utilize township roads. So are there any roads then that need to be upgraded in order to help service that new development? So everything is based on growth-related needs, and that is the main function of a development charge, rate. With that being said, you know, you are empowered through the Development Charge Act to have a bylaw. You currently have one right now. It's not mandatory to have one. However, as you'll see through the presentation, you know, the reason for a development charge really is to help offset the costs that would otherwise be borne by your existing residents and businesses. So really, it's more of a if new growth is coming into town, the new growth should pay for their share of the infrastructure that is being constructed or purchased. So just some background on the development charges. As I said, they're not new. In its previous life, it was actually called a lot levy under the Planning Act. And this all stemmed through the 1950s as Ontario was trying to, really develop a lot of the farmland and agricultural, areas. And that kind of, took place for a good, 30, 40 years until the first iteration of the Development Charge Act came to play at the end of the 80s. Now, that original act actually did evolve and was re-released in 1997. And that essentially, set the framework as to what the Development Charge Act we're working with today. The prior DCA, the Development Charge Act, really, had guidelines as to what you could include, but it was very up in the air as to what municipalities were including for capital costs. Like, there was really no line in the sand as to, well, is this more of an enhancement? Like, I just want to go from a brick building to a marble building. At the end of the day, it's still a new building, but, how do we differentiate what truly is a growth-related cost versus something that's more of a service enhancement? So the 1997 Act is really the Development Charge Act that we work with today, and it's been updated probably about seven to eight times now. And that's what you're seeing on the right-hand side. Since the release of the current Development Charge Act, there's been a number of changes, and I'll document them on the next page. You have gone through a couple of these in your prior DC study. For example, Bill 73, that change essentially instructed us that we have to release the study a minimum of 60 days before the council can consider the bylaw. Again, prior to that, some municipalities were releasing the study and then passing a bylaw basically within 2 weeks, which isn't really providing for any of the heads up for the development community nor the public to be able to digest the information. So there's quite a bit of changes that were adhered to in Bill 73 that we did make those changes as part of your prior DC study in 2019. Now, subsequent to that, there have been a number of changes, and I'll quote it on the next slide. And most of those came from, again, these bills 108 all the way to Bill 23, which is the most recent one that you may all have in the back of your minds. Just going through the list, Bill 108, that provided for timing of provision payments as a requirement for the development charge bylaws. So as an example, if you were a rental housing or institutional development and you came in to the township with a building permit application, you were allowed to pay your DCs over 6 installments. So basically you could pay one, at the beginning of the application and then 5 years thereafter. So they allowed that so that way it would just ease the burden on some of these developments on having to provide that cash flow initially. I do say here that in Bill 108, they also talked about not-for-profit housing. Now, they were allowed to historically pay over 21 installments, essentially 20 years. Now, that would have been a little bit of an issue for municipalities to have to track a payment over that course of time. However, fast forward to today in Bill 23, that provision has actually been removed because nonprofit housing is now 100% exempt from development charges. So while they were allowed to pay over 21 installments, they no longer are eligible to pay for DCs anyways because they're now completely exempt. Now, having said that, Bill 108 also introduced a DC rate freeze. So what that means is if I were a developer coming to the municipality and I had a application, whether through site plan or zoning bylaw amendments, then my rate, whatever your DC rates are, they're frozen for the next 2 years. So if I come today and your rate was $1,000, and then we're going through this process of updating your DC, and for all intents and purposes, it goes up to $1,500, then since I am within my rate freeze, I stick to the $1,000, which was the original agreement, because I am allowed to pay that amount over up until a 2-year period block. After that, then I would be subject to whatever the rates are at that time. Now, you are also allowed as a municipality to add interest costs to these. Because at the end of the day, there is an opportunity cost for having to wait until the payments come into the municipality. So you are allowed to apply interest to these installment payments or the rate freeze to help at least with the cost of borrow. Bill 138, that just made a minor amendment to Bill 108, which essentially just removed the installment payments from commercial and industrial developments. So historically, they were part of that, but now if you're a commercial or industrial development, you just pay a one-time cost at building permit. Or if you have any other agreements in place that you would pay either at a later date or earlier date. In terms of Bill 197, that was a large change to the Development Charge Act that occurred in 2020. And they actually provided a list of eligible services that we can collect now for the DC. Historically, the way the act was structured was it was more like an insurance where we will tell you what is excluded, but we won't tell you what is included. So it was up to the interpretation of a municipality to figure out what municipal service you'd like to include as a DC recoverable. Now they actually have an inclusionary list. So if it doesn't fall within these 20 items, then it is not eligible at the end of the day. So it's a slight tweak. There haven't been too many changes, or at least ones that would affect the township. But there are some larger municipalities, such as your Torontos or Hamiltons and such, that had historical services that would no longer be eligible because of this change. And then one of the last things as well within Bill 197 was the ability to select different planning horizons. So historically, softer services such as parks and recreation, library, typically those were only looked at a 10-year planning horizon. Anything else with respect to infrastructure enabling services such as roads, water, wastewater, they can go to any extended time horizon. So now that 10-period planning horizon has been removed, so we can use any time horizon for any services at the end of the day. Not a big deal, just because most of the services anyways are looked at on a 10-year planning horizon because that's typically how your budgets are formulated. Typically, the only ones that we still stick to a longer planning horizon are more of your water and wastewater, and to some extent roads, because you have to plan for at least the treatment capacity of a plant, or the pipes. So you're always looking at what is the capacity at the end of the day for certain assets, versus again a recreation center that you could probably plan within a 10-year forecast, or maybe even more. But that's where we draw the line as to the timing evaluation. Bill 213, what that did was just add a mandatory exemption for universities. So if you have any universities that are proposing to come online within the municipality, and they any lands that they would own and operate, essentially would be exempt from DCs. Now, this one is a little bit tricky because this isn't based on the building. For them, it's actually based on the land area. So, for example, if you had a commercial entity that partnered with the university and they wanted to build on university lands, the way this is worded, there may be a possibility that that particular development, so that commercial facility, would be exempt even though it's not for the purposes of the university. So it is a little bit of a nuance that they did here, and it wasn't under the Development Charge Act. It was under the colleges and universities legislation. So this is something we're monitoring right now. There hasn't been an issue so far, and I don't believe there'll be an issue in the township in the near future, but it is something to monitor, especially moving forward on these types of developments. Bill 109, I'll just skim through that, but essentially it was an annual treasurer statement that needed to be updated. So through finance and Nellie and her team, they just have some additional requirements that they have to do when submitting to the province in terms of their treasurer statements and the paperwork. And then lastly, Bill 23. So this one is a couple of slides on its own because it is now the largest change to the Development Charge Act to date. I'll kind of step you through. I know there's a lot of information here, and again, I'll be open for questions, but if I could start at the bottom piece in the green. So what Bill 23 did was include a number of changes to the Act in terms of exemptions, mandatory phase-ins, as well as a lot of administrative changes that need to be adhered to by a municipality if you are passing a new DC bylaw. So the ones in green here, these are currently in force, and I'll focus on these first, and then we'll go back up top to the orange. If you had any inclusionary zoning units, again, not applicable for your municipality, but any affordable housing units within these areas would be exempt from development charges. So these would be more in your GO stations if you're building, those high-rise developments, so that way those commuters have a place to live, move towards the GO transit hubs, and then be about their day going to work. So those type of units, if they are considered affordable, they would be exempt. This other unit, nonprofit housing, if you recall, I mentioned earlier, they are now completely exempt from the DC payments, as well as any future installments. So if you had a nonprofit housing development come into the township, say last year, they would have been paying those annual installments. But come November 28, 2023, when Bill 23 came into effect, any payments then moving forward would be null and void because they are now 100% exempt. And then moving forward too, if you have any nonprofit housing that meet the definition under the Act, they would be exempt as well. And then with the additional residential units, this exemption has already been in place for quite some time now. However, they just clarified it so they essentially identify a second and third dwelling unit within single, semis, and townhomes to be exempt. And historically, if you were to add, say, 2 additional apartments to a single detached home, the qualifier was as long as those 2 apartments don't more than double the size of the footprint of the home, then they would be DC exempted. Now this removed that qualification of having to be more than double the size of the home. So in theory, if you were to add 2 additional apartments to, say, a single detached home, that size qualifier is no longer mandated. So as long as they can prove that it is ancillary to that primary dwelling, then those units would be exempt from the DC. So that's currently in force, and then I'll go back to the not in force. And this is something we're monitoring at the end of the day. But there are these definitions with respect to affordable rental units and affordable owned units. So if you are considered an affordable rental unit or affordable owned unit, and the original definition was as long as that particular unit was no more than 80% of either the average market rent or average purchase price of the home, then you would be considered exempt. Now, this is currently not enforced because the province is still trying to figure out, how to properly define this. First off, are they going to look at it from a geographic area? So in your case, will it be Simcoe County? Will it be just the average purchase price or average market rent within Oro-Medonte? And even within Oro-Medonte, is it going to be by area? Because you may have some areas where the market rent or the average purchase price is higher, just given the nature of the location. Maybe Horseshoe Valley would be more expensive than going out somewhere that's not within that core area. So this is still up in the air, and that's why it's currently not in force. And just as a note, Bill 134, the Affordable Homes and Good Jobs Act in 2023, actually was released in September of last year and received royal assent on December 4th, which actually modified these definitions where the new criteria also includes an income qualifier. So for example, if an affordable owned unit would be considered affordable if that cost of that unit is less than 30% of the 60th percentile of income for households in the municipality, or 90% of the purchase price. Now, I know that sounds like a mouthful, and similar to rental is the same idea, 30% of the 60th percentile of income rental households. And I'll just give you an example of what that means. So for example, if your 60th percentile within Oro-Medonte is making, say, $5,000 a month, as a household income, then what this is saying is the rent, in order to qualify as a unit to be rental, which would be affordable and therefore exempt, would mean that that unit would have to represent a monthly rental of 30% of that $5,000. So in this case, you're essentially looking at $1,500 a month. So if that rental unit is built and the rent that the owner is willing to charge is $1,500 a month or less, and that meets the criteria of the 60%, then those type of units would be exempt from DCs. Now, at the end of the day, this is all still in the air because the bulletins haven't been released yet, but we are monitoring it, and we will see how this plays out over the coming months as the province is examining these criteria. Okay, sorry, I know there was a mouthful there, but these are all things that'll affect essentially the revenues of the municipality moving forward. Because any exemptions or discounts essentially is something that if you can't charge for DCs, then the difference has to be funded from existing taxes, existing rates at the end of the day. Again, some other changes to the Development Charge Act. If you are, like I said, a rental housing unit, you also get a discount based on the number of bedrooms. So if you are a 1-bedroom or studio apartment, you can demonstrate that your whole building is solely for rental housing, then you do have a 15% discount on the development charge in place. Likewise, if you're a 2-bedroom, then you get a 20% discount. And if you're a 3-bedroom or more, then you get a 25% discount on the DCs. Further revenue reductions, the province did also remove housing as an eligible DC service. Now, it was a little bit odd that, with Bill 23, the whole goal was to provide and create more housing within Ontario, but yet they removed the ability for municipalities to be part of that game of creating housing from a DC perspective. So this doesn't impact Oro-Medonte per se, but it does impact the county's DC as they had housing in their development charge calculations, which now, as of Bill 23, they are no longer eligible to collect for. Capital cost amendments. So we'll touch upon this during the examples, but essentially, the province has removed the ability to include studies and land for capital cost inclusions within the DC. Now, there is an asterisk here, just because most generic studies have been removed. However, with land, they have not prescribed any services that land would be exempted as of yet. So for now, anything moving forward, if you do have a facility that requires land acquisitions, we are still including it into the DC study because the province hasn't prescribed what service land would be ineligible for yet. The largest one here as well is the mandatory phase-in of the DC. So what this means is any bylaws that are passed after January 1st, 2022, so this was retroactive, basically means that if you were to pass a charge right now, say $10,000, the first year that you can collect a maximum is 80%. So at the end of the day, whatever charge we calculate and you pass, you can only implement a maximum of 80% of that rate because of this mandatory phase-in from the province. And then every year thereafter, you are able to increase that recovery by an additional 5% until year 5, where you recover 100% of that cost. Now, you are allowed to still index the rate. So, it would be year 2 at 85% plus whatever your indexing is due to inflation. So there is still some increases there. However, these rules must be followed, under the Act. And then the historical service standards, for the most part, this doesn't affect the municipality per se. But when we are doing the calculations, instead of a 10-year historical outlook on your current inventory, we now have to look at 15 years. So just a little bit more work working with staff trying to determine what you had dating back to 2009. But it is something that, we are working with the municipality in order to generate these outputs. Now, I would like to add to this that the province recently released a news, through their ERO, that they did announce that they are reviewing the mandatory phase-in as well as the eligibility of studies under Bill 23. So that it was a very generic statement that they put out there, earlier this year and actually late last year. So at the end of the day, we will be monitoring this and keeping all of our clients apprised to any of the changes. But should any changes to the mandatory phase-in or the studies, take place before the release of the study, we'll ensure that we incorporate those, those policy changes within the modeling. And that way, because especially if studies are eligible again, I'm pretty sure you'd like to have a few of your studies be recovered from the DCs where possible, instead of it being funded from taxes. And then finally, with the administration, again, nothing too much here other than the fact that that maximum interest rate, whereas historically a municipality was able to determine what that interest rate would be for those rate freezes or those annual installment payments. Now the province actually has capped those interest rates for all municipalities, and it is now set at the prior quarter's prime interest rate plus 1%. So we do track this, throughout Ontario, and as Nelly and the finance team require it, we're more than happy to provide that to staff to utilize for any agreements moving forward. With respect to the allocation of the 60% of monies, so what all this is saying is, as you collect DC monies every year, at the end of the day, when the finance team has to put together these annual statements to whether the council or to the province, you just have to recognize, of those revenues, can you identify where 60% of the monies will go on a project-specific basis? It doesn't mean you have to spend it, but it does mean that you are earmarking that revenues for a future project that's identified within the DC study. Now, if you pivot and you change projects, down the road, it doesn't handcuff you to say that the 60% is only for that project. This is also based on, council's annual review of the budget and what you determine needs to be, approved in future years. Sorry, was there a question?
No, sorry, there isn't that I see at this time.
Okay. And then finally, the DC bylaws, they changed it so that the expiry date, instead of a 5-year period, it's now at a 10-year period. However, it is worthwhile for a municipality to just at least do a an interim check on a periodic basis before the full 10 years. Just because what we've noticed is with indexing, where you are allowed to inflate your DCs, we noticed that tender prices as well as any construction costs have actually been increasing at a larger rate, at a faster rate than inflation that you're able to increase your DCs by. So if you start seeing that gap is bridging between, say, what you're able to index your roads DC, for example, relative to how much a road construction cost would actually incur within the municipality, then that's something maybe perhaps to reassess certain services as to whether to increase the DC at a faster rate than waiting the full 10 years. So with that being said, I'll just quickly go over the methodology. Again, I won't go into too much of the gory details, but essentially with development charges, the main goal here is that you are servicing new growth and new users. And there's no magic to it. It's either you collect it from development charges, which is the left-hand side of this graphic, or it's funded from rates, taxes, and reserves, or other sources. So at the end of the day, if you didn't have DCs, you're still having to pay for these infrastructure works, but it's just now coming from a different set of revenue tools. So DCs are there to help offset that right-hand side of this triangle. And at the end of the day, whatever policies you put into play also affect the amount that you would collect from development charges, and how you shift some of those costs towards the rates, taxes, and reserves. Just a brief overview, again, not to go into all 80 different clauses of the Development Charge Act. Really the overall methodology we could probably summarize into these 6 key points. The first thing we look at is we identify the amount, type, and location of growth. So again, as we're working with staff, we try to determine, where are the developments taking place, what's in the development pipeline, what's in the supply, and really where are these pockets of development occurring. Once we identify that, then we have to discuss with staff and through your master plans, determining what are the servicing needs in order to accommodate that growth. Do we need new water supply? Do we need new roads because some of the roads are in a gravel or rural area, and because developments will be in that adjacent area, maybe it needs to be upgraded to a tar and chip or asphalt, right? So at the end of the day, it's identifying here's the servicing, what is the servicing to accommodate that type of development. Number 3 then says, well, we do need the servicing, but now what type of capital do I need in order to accommodate that servicing? For example, perhaps you're growing by 10,000 people, and you now need parks and recreation services, because as per your master plan, you must provide X amount of servicing, for the population. Number 3 then says, well, what type of capital would you like? Would you like a pool? Would you like an artificial turf? Would you like more parks? Would you like playgrounds? To us, it doesn't matter, because what you're trying to do is meet that servicing need. The capital is whatever you deem necessary as per, your plan moving forward, whether it's through the OP or through your Parks and Rec master plan, or just through council's discussions, through what you hear from the public, right? So for us, we care about number 2, the accommodating of the servicing needs. Number 3 is whatever projects you provide us in order to meet those needs. And then after that, we then deduct a number of items. If you're receiving any grants, subsidies, or other contributions, whether it's from the development community or other municipalities, we would deduct those costs, those contributions from these capital costs. We then also take a look at the benefit to the existing development. So let's say, you're building a new fire station, but you already had a fire station before and you were just gonna, demolish that one or sell it. And now you're building a fire station that's double the size. So to us, the benefit to existing is that first half that you already had a 5,000 square foot fire station, but you're just doubling it to 10. So really the incremental growth is that next 5,000, right? So that's how we would, at a minimum level, look at the benefit to existing. And we do this on a project by project basis. I mentioned earlier that we have to do a 15-year historical service standard calculation, and I'll touch upon that in a moment. But essentially, whatever you've provided in the average in the past can be no higher than what you want to provide in the future. So I'll go through a calculation for you briefly, but essentially, whatever service levels that you've provided over the last 15 years, that's what we can provide again moving forward. As you build assets, that service standard level increases over time, but for now, it is a mathematical equation as per the Development Charge Act. And then lastly, reserve funds. If you have any monies in the reserve funds because of prior year's collections through previous bylaws, then we need to net that off of the capital cost as well because you already have monies in the bank. Likewise, the opposite is true. If you have a reserve fund deficit because you had a project that you were funding, then any of those deficits can be funded through the development charge calculations because they are still growth-related eligible items. You just need to make sure you pay yourselves back over time from new developments, okay? And then we take that information and we get a net cost and we divide it between residential and non-residential benefit. So this must be done under the Act. It is a requirement. And typically we look at several different factors, whether it's based on population to employment, by area, by capacity, whatever the case may be, but it needs to be allocated between the two categories. And then once you allocate it, then we divide it by the growth within the Development Charge Act, within the Development Charge calculations. So as I said, if you had $1 million in residential and then you had 10,000 people, then you would do one divided by the other, and there's your cost per capita. So again, that's more of a simplistic example, but this is how the charges are calculated. Again, I'm more than happy to provide this to you as more of an education standpoint. If there's any questions, feel free. I'm more than happy to answer afterwards. But with respect to the service standards, how we actually undertake the calculations is, as I mentioned, we take a look at the last 15 years, and we do two measures. We take a look at what's called a quality and quantity measure. So the quantity measure would be, the actual number. So for example, for fire stations, how many fire stations do you have and what's the square footage of each one? So really we're just counting, what's the quantity? The quality then says, well, what's the replacement cost of these stations if you had to replace it in today's dollars? So, let's say you have 6 different stations. Well, if on average each one is like, maybe $3 million, now we have a service standard that we're working with where, of those 6 stations, there's $18 million worth of assets that you've contributed towards over the last 15 years. So again, it is a mathematical exercise, and I'll provide you with an example in the next slide. And this calculation, it is mandatory, but it doesn't apply to water, wastewater, storm, or transit. In your case, we don't have to worry about transit or stormwater because stormwater is based on the local service policy, which means for the most part, the developers are paying for their own stormwater recoveries and their assets. And then transit, as of right now, through discussions with staff, that's not something that we're looking into the next 10-year period. But we do have water as part of the calculations. So sorry, I apologize for the size here. Hopefully you can see it in front of your screens, but this is a service standard example. And it is an example that's very specific to Oro-Medonte, as this is one of the sheets that we're working with staff as well as the fire department. So as you can see here, when we're looking at your service standards, we have to take a look at the last 15 years, and then we itemize it by the asset. So in this case, we have about 7 locations, going from Shanty Bay, the old Station 1, all the way to your Moonstone, number 6. So each one there represents the square footage that each station provides. And again, this is a draft example. We're still updating these numbers, but I wanted to show this more of an illustrative approach. Where, as you can see here, over time, we have to take a look at what square footage did each station provide over 15 years. So it does look repetitive, but the reason for that is we have to calculate your per capita standard each and every year. So we take all this information divided by the population that you're seeing on that second set of rows to get a per capita standard. What is your level of investment on a per person basis? So we take this information, and if you take a look at the right-hand side, we have an estimated value on the dollar per square foot. So in this example, we're saying to rebuild these stations like for like, but using the new building code and all the fire safety codes, etc., we're looking at roughly $500 per square foot to rebuild most of these stations, except for the new Shanty Bay Station 1, which was at $600 a square foot, is a little bit more enhanced than the others per se. We take that pure construction cost and then we layer on additional costs, such as buying land, because stations aren't good unless facilities aren't good unless you have land that it sits on. We take a look at furniture, fixtures, and equipment. We take a look at landscaping, site works, parking, etc., to get an all-in cost. So what this is saying is to build, let's say, Hawkstone, your 4 bay, it's $614 all in, and we've applied that cost for all of your facilities, except for the Shanty Bay, which is at $814. We take that column, we multiply it by every single square footage to get a replacement value. So what this is saying, for example, to rebuild, let's say that Hawkstone branch, it's about $2.3 million. Horseshoe Valley is at 4.7. Your new Shanty Bay is at $7 million. Again, these are all illustrative, and we are still working with staff, but this is pretty much saying that if we had to rebuild all of your fire stations today, it's about $20.5 million. And as you can see, that cost has actually increased over time because you added another facility. Back in 2009, you only had $13 million worth of facility space, right? So when we do the service standards, we actually average this last 15 years. So we take those total costs, divided by your population over the respective years to get a per capita amount. So you can see we started at $651 as your investment per capita back in 2009. And as you've built your new Shanty Bay Fire Station, right now in 2023, you have a per capita standard of $877. Again, just pure math calculations here. There's no magic to it. We take the average of those last 15 years, and our average over the last 15 years on a per capita is $702 per square foot. So we take that magic number and we multiply it by your growth forecast. So in this case, through working with staff, we're probably looking at a 10-year forecast for you. And, again, just this is a good segue, but we're looking at roughly 2,941 people. That'll be the growth within the municipality. So we take that 702, multiply it by that 2,900 to get your total DC eligible amount for fire facilities of just over $2 million. So what this is saying is, if the municipality would like to include capital costs within the DC study, then I can recover at most up to $2 million for facilities. But we do the same math for vehicles and equipment. For we take a look at the bunker gear, all the other various equipment that fire uses, and we lump all these eligible amounts into one upend value, and that's what we use for fire services. And we'll do this exact same calculation for roads, parks and rec, library, and by law enforcement, your Provincial Offenses Act. Okay, so that's the service standard. So now we have our ceiling. What then we work with staff with is determine what capital costs would you like to include as part of the DC study. And the capital cost, as defined by the Act, has a number of items that you can include. As I mentioned, the land piece, while it is being ineligible as of Bill 23, nothing's been prescribed to date. So for now, we're still keeping it in. You can improve land. So for example, if you bought parkland under the Planning Act or your parkland dedication, we can actually use development charge money to improve that land, putting a park, putting playgrounds, etc. So that's something that we can utilize for the DCs. We can acquire, lease, construct, or improve buildings, facilities, or structures, as well as furnitures and equipment. Again, rolling stock, so vehicles, we can pay using development charges. If you are leasing anything, again, whether you purchase it outright or you lease, we can include leased amounts as well, as long as there's a capital component of that lease. For example, maybe you didn't want to, have to purchase another snowplow. So you got a company to, plow a certain segment of the municipality. Well, we can include the capital components of those costs, for the lease, because at the end of the day, it's a growth-related item to have to plow a new area. You're just not doing it yourself. You're just asking another entity to do it. Circulation material for libraries. Libraries aren't very good unless they have materials to provide to the public. As I mentioned, studies are no longer eligible. However, we are still included certain studies if it is part of a design or an environmental assessment, let's say, for a specific project. So if you had to undertake a road project and there was an engineering design or even an EA involved as part of it, then typically, since that is direct to that project where you can't do that project unless you do these other design criterias, then we are still including that as part of the cost of the DC. What truly we're not including is more your broader studies, such as your transportation master plans, water master plans, parks and rec master plans, OP updates, etc. I already mentioned about the 10-year horizon, the removal of the planning horizon, so you can pick whatever time you want, except for transit. And then, as I already mentioned about the reductions on the capital costs. And then lastly, that last bullet on the authorized costs incurred or proposed to be incurred. As I mentioned, the council of the day, you have the ability to, to pass the budgets on an annual basis, and you decide at the end of the day what capital is moving forward as staff presented to you. However, as part of the DC study, we have to identify capital that is also not part of your capital budget because it may be to support development, which is probably 5, 10, 15 years from now. So it may include cost that is incurred, which is again council endorsed, or proposed to be incurred, so about to be presented to you at a later date, as well, and whether they're by yourselves or another municipality or another local board. So for example, if you had a purchase agreement with one of your neighbors, but you have a cost sharing agreement, then you can include those costs that they're incurring because at the end of the day, you have an obligation towards it. So we can include that as well within the DC. And then the limitations on the capital, we can't include parkland acquisition. As I said, we can improve the land, but I can't buy the land for you. You have the ability to do so under the Planning Act, so that's why you have to use that piece of legislation. Vehicles and equipment must have a useful life of 7 years or longer. And then computer equipment, really that's more administrative. We can't include within the DC. If it's integral to the delivery of the service, for example, if you're buying a new vehicle and, like let's say a fire truck, I mean, clearly there's computers in there. We're not going to slice and dice those computers from the cost of the whole fire truck, right? It's part of the fire truck. It needs, it's there for responses, GPS, etc. So that if it's integral to the service, then it is part of the DC. And then this just provides you with an example, for the capital for fire. This is a preliminary listing that we've developed with staff. Now, this is still subject to change. Again, this is more of an illustrative purposes for today's meeting. But here's an example where, for example, moving forward over the next 10 to 20 years, perhaps there may be an expansion to one of your facilities in Station 3. We may look at, some additional miscellaneous equipment, such as a dry hydrant, diesel exhaust extraction, potentially a new station, and then as well, vehicles to support those increases as well. And as I mentioned, we identify the timing, the gross costs, and then we have the various deductions that you're seeing on the right-hand side, right? The benefit to existing, other subsidies and other development from other contributions from other development. And one thing that we also have here is what's called a post-period benefit. Now, it's not populated right now, but what that means is if you had a project that would benefit the population even beyond this growth forecast period, it's still DC eligible, but we're not putting it on the backs of today's developers because that growth hasn't even been captured as part of this analysis. So that's why those amounts would be deducted, but then would be picked up in subsequent development charge studies. So as that growth then is part of your calculations, then those costs can then be distributed amongst those parties. Again, just coming to a close here, but we have some DC eligible services, as I mentioned, that we are examining as part of this process. We're looking at water, services related to highway, which is your roads and public works, fire, parks and rec, and POA, Provincial Offenses Act. Now, we are also, any studies that would be attributable to these, as I mentioned, they typically have been excluded from the list, unless, of course, it is a direct link to a particular project. And then just to summarize, at the end of the day, as I mentioned, we take the cost of infrastructure divided by, residential or non-residential growth. And that's how we come up with our development charge, whether it's on a per unit basis, per single, per townhouse, per apartment, or on a per non-residential square foot basis for, industrial, commercial institutions. In addition to the development charge study, we also provide a local service policy. And what this is, it just outlines what the developers need to build on their tickets. That's really localized within their subdivisions. That would not be part of the development charge calculations. So these are typically your local roads, again, local stormwater mains, stormwater ponds. Maybe for parkland requirements, you want to ensure that when they're providing you with parkland, it's seeded, sodded, fenced. Maybe they don't strip the topsoil, so they're not giving you, like barren land that you have to spend a lot of money to convert into a park. So this actually has been done in prior DC studies. And we are working with staff to examine the current local service policy and see if there's any potential updates that need to be adhered to. There are some mandatory exemptions you must adhere to at the end of the day when administering your development charge bylaw. Just going down the list, I mean, some of these I've already talked about, but the first one, if you do have a development charge bylaw, you cannot charge the upper tier, nor can the upper tier charge the lower tier. So, there is that relationship there. So if Simcoe County is building a facility within Oro-Medonte, they don't pay the local DC. Likewise, if you are building something, you don't pay the county DC, as well as school boards, because they're higher in the pecking order because they're under the province. Industrial building expansions, you must provide a 50% you must provide an exemption if they expand up to 50% of their current footprints. Now, we do draw the line in the sand, so this isn't a habitual expansion. So typically what municipalities do is they do put a, whether it's an end date or a one-time expansion clause. So then that way this isn't abused where some developer may come in, they have a 100,000 square foot facility, they want to go to 150, not pay a DC, come back a year later, go to 225, not pay a DC. So, it is a one-time expansionary exemption. I did mention already about these adding the 2 apartments and then the additional residential units. I also mentioned about the Bill 213 as well as all the other items in orange, so I won't touch upon that. Now, with respect to the discretionary exemptions, you are allowed as a municipality and council to enact whatever exemptions you'd like on top of the mandatory ones. But again, keep in mind, any exemptions or discounts you provide, in order to make the development charge whole, those discounts and monies need to be made up from other sources, other non-DC sources. And that's whether that's taxation, water rates, reserves, etc. So really, you can reduce in whole or in part, whether it's a type or a class of development. A class of development, let's say, would be all industrial or all commercial or all institutional. You can implement anywhere from 0 all the way to 100% of the calculated charge. And then for a type, I mean, if you wanted to exempt, places of worship, bona fide farms, you have the ability to do so. You may phase in the charge over time, although the province has already made that mandatory. But if you wanted to do anything else in addition to the traditional phase-in that they've implemented, you can choose to do so as well. And then redevelopment credits. These are not part of the act, but essentially what this is saying is if I had my house burned down, I should be allowed a period of time to redevelop it and not pay a DC, right? Because I already was part of the system. And typically that's about a 5-year period. And then likewise, if you're going from one unit type to the other, let's say you had, 3 single detached homes and you want to build a commercial strip, then I should be allowed to get a credit up to those 3 single detached homes. And then the difference I'm paying is whatever the charge is for a per square foot on that commercial building, less whatever those 3 single detaches are. So I'm only paying the incremental difference because I already had that capacity in place for the municipality. So now we're actually going to get into the specifics of the DCs. As of right now, we do have a growth forecast prepared, and we have worked with the building department, planning staff, finance, as well as our in-house planners. And what we're looking at right now is an average of about 112 units per year over the next 10 years. So you can see the black line was your historical building activity, dating back to 2013. The red line provides the average historical building activity. However, given COVID, we saw a spike in the last few years, but then we also saw a slowdown, all because of interest rates rising, through the Bank of Canada. So, and that's not just yourselves, that's across the board within Ontario. A lot of municipalities experience lower building permit activity, and you can see that reflected in your 2023 forecasts, as well as, given the fact we're in 2024 now, that most likely will be converted to a black line before we release the end of the study. However, with that being said, we did examine, what is currently in the pipeline, what you have for development applications. And this is where we've noted, roughly 1,124 new units, residential units over the next 10 years. And that translates to roughly just under 3,000 people, over that forecast period. Predominantly, these are mostly single detached, but we do have a mix of townhomes as well as apartments. And when we're looking at the non-residential growth, we're looking at roughly 646,000 square feet of development. And that's mixed between industrial, commercial, and institutional. With that being said, I know, sorry, this chart is a little bit busy, but these are your current rates as of the turn of this year. So as of right now, if you are building within the township, if we start at the top, for services related to roads, fire, parks and rec and studies, we're looking at a charge of roughly $16,600. And as you can see, it goes down as the unit type gets smaller. So multiples are in that 13,500. You have the two different apartment categories, the larger bedrooms, 2+, they're about 9,700. 6,800 on the smaller apartments. And then your special care, special dwelling. What these are if you ever had any institutional development, such as like a Chartwell or retirement homes, really they're being charged more on a per bedroom basis. So that's where that 6,100 really reflects the charge of, a one bedroom unit within those special care dwellings. And then your non-res charge is at $5.91 per square foot. Now, that's your township-wide charge. If you are building, say, within the Horseshoe Valley area, you also have a charge with respect to water. So that's another $6,000 for a single detached home. And then additionally, at the bottom, if you see here, there's, depending on if you are within this particular area within Horseshoe, you also have another charge for a new well and pump of $6,800. And then there's a $12,600 charge on the wastewater for these particular developments, which is, I believe, Horseshoe Valley Phase 2 and then Phase 3 and 4 of landscapes. Now, through working with staff, we are re-examining these charges, and I believe there are some of these items that have really, completed its, its recovery for these particular items. And I believe moving forward, when we release the study, you will see that these number of these charges will be reduced because some of these will not be moving forward in the next update. And then lastly, with Warminster at the bottom, you can see they have an area-specific charge as well, which again, we are re-examining with staff as to which ones will be part of the final reports through the review of the bylaws and agreements that have been in place with these particular developments. You do have some current discretionary exemptions, places of worship, cemeteries, and burial grounds. If you have a hospital receiving aid from the Public Hospitals Act, you are exempting them, and as well as farm buildings. Now, this is something that, unless there's any appetite for council or staff to change, we will put that in as part of the continuation of these discretionary exemptions. However, you have the opportunity to add, amend, or remove any of these items, prior to the consideration of the bylaw. And then finally, just a comparison where you stand relative to your peers. As you can see right now, based on a township-wide charge, if you're not within water and wastewater servicing, you're really at the bottom end of the this survey, really just above Aurelia. But then once you're into the Warminster or Horseshoe Valley area, again, once you're looking at water and wastewater servicing, or in this case more so water servicing, you can see here how you're kind of within that Collingwood, Wasaga Beach, Essa, and Ramera charges. And then obviously going to the left-hand side, now you're getting into those single tiers such as Barrie, and then some of the bigger municipalities in Simcoe such as Bradford, West Gwillimbury. So you can see with BWG, they are the highest charge at the end of the day in terms of DCs. And just to provide you with a little bit of context with these tables, you can see here that the dark blue at the very bottom, that is Simcoe County's charge, so that's the upper tier charge. The lighter blue are the lower tier charges or single tier if they don't have an upper tier, such as Barrie. And then the green is the education DCs. So you do collect for the education for the school board. So these charts here represent an all-in cost for the three components. In terms of commercial, we've done the same, survey as well. So you can see in this particular scenario, you are still on the right-hand side of the municipalities here, really just above Springwater and Orillia. Keep in mind that Springwater, they should be updating their charge, within the next few years. They do have quite a bit of agreements there that they are trying to implement in terms of servicing for water. So that is something where maybe it's not being reflected in their DC right now because some of these works are being negotiated. So again, there's a lot of things here moving forward. There are some municipalities that are looking at examining their DCs, and as you can see on the very left-hand side here, being Barrie, New Tecumseh, Innisville, Bradford, West Gwillimbury, etc. And then lastly, your industrial charge, again, on a similar scale, some municipalities do discount their DCs, while others completely don't charge it at all. So you can see, Penetanguishene and Tay, they do not have industrial DCs right now. And as you can see here, what we've done for illustrative purposes is also zeroed out the county's charges, just because, they do have a program right now, which is currently under review on the abatement program for industrial. We are still seeing how that will pan out over the coming weeks, and we will keep council and staff apprised of any of those changes. But as of now, we are just assuming that, if that was still the case, then that's where Penetanguishene and Tay would land. And then everyone else, as you can see, their charges are reflected on this slide. And then that's it. That concludes my presentation. At the end of the day, as I mentioned, that we will have the draft calculations and findings over the coming weeks as we finalize the meetings and the discussions with the different various departments. We are hopeful to release the background study, as I said, in spring of this year, and then to have the mandatory public meeting and council consideration of the bylaw subsequent to the release of the study. And we will be back with council, during the mandatory public meeting, unless of course requested, to come at an earlier date for whatever you'd like for us to present. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much, Byron. At this time, I will open for any questions or of clarity or questions. Deputy Mayor Lavoie.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Byron. I did have one question with regard to the growth numbers. If we underestimate them or overestimate them, what impact does that have on the actual DC charges?
Great question. Through the mayor, at the end of the day, the way we set out the development charge calculations, the capital program mirrors or matches the growth projections. So if you did have, more, people, perhaps, development is occurring faster than, what is anticipated through this forecast, then really this 10-year forecast becomes a 6-year forecast or a 5-year forecast. So we would have to revisit the study again anyways to be able to identify new infrastructure to match that additional growth. But for now, based on this, 2,900 people, and as well as the 646,000 square feet of non-residential space, the capital that we're trying to build with staff and identify is meant to accommodate that level of growth. So at the end of the day, it's almost like a relationship to it. So if you add more growth, we need to add more capital. Likewise, if it doesn't materialize, well, this is still the capital you need for this type of population, but maybe it's not going to happen in 10 years. Maybe it's a 15-year forecast now. Either way, that capital identified is still meant to service this population.
Thank you for that. Do you have a supplemental?
I did have a question on other settlement areas with water services, because I know we do have them, but there are only two noted in the charts.
I apologize. So the question there is...
Is that there are other settlement areas with water systems, but only two of the areas with water systems had DC charges associated with them.
So to the mayor, great question. With that respect, the items that were identified for the DC study were expansions or upgrades to, say, water mains or storage for these particular areas. I believe, through staff's, review of the capacity for maybe perhaps those other treatment areas, there is no need currently right now to expand any of those. And if there's no need to expand, then those capital costs would not be identified within the DC study.
Thank you very much for that clarification. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Byron, and kind of to piggyback on Deputy Mayor's question. So from my understanding, if we were to underestimate growth and to reenact a new DC bylaw, we would then have to discount it to 80% in the first year of that new bylaw, right? So if we underestimated the growth, then we charge a new DC bylaw, we can only capture 80% of that in the first year. So then we're actually behind the 8 ball if we underestimate the growth. Is that a correct understanding, Byron?
So third mayor, so I guess just for a point of clarity, so when you say so there's two items there. So there's underestimating the growth, but then passing a bylaw. So are we saying that we're passing the bylaw based on these growth numbers, but what if they are underestimated at the end of the day?
And so if they were underestimated and we had more growth, and then we said, hey, we actually need more capital, we should reinvestigate into a new DC bylaw, well, then that new DC bylaw is subject to that 80% restriction in the first year.
Through the mayor, that is correct. If you, based on how the wording is right now in the act, anytime the bylaw is reopened and repassed, you always go back to the 80%. Now, having said that, we have came up with a few solutions with municipalities, to think of if they would like to implement it. And one of the things is to pass separate bylaws for each service, because then that way, for example, let's say we pass a separate bylaw for your roads, parks and rec, fire, etc., and water, and 2 years down the road, you realize that, okay, well, we're still good on the parks and rec side, but at the end of the day, we should really open it up because maybe we underestimated the water treatments. So in that regard, we can at least open up the water bylaw. That may have to go back to 80%, but at least all the other services are still at that 85, 90% at that time, leaving it untouched, as long as the capital within that is still reasonable, right? If you have to open it up, then you're opening up everything at the end of the day.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Hutchison.
Thank you, Mayor Greenlaw, through you to Byron. Thank you, Byron. And just sort of playing on these questions that are happening. The growth projection, that number, I guess I'm curious as to where we landed on the number for your study, as there has been different iterations of growth numbers that I've heard of. So I want to make sure that we're all singing from the same song sheet when it comes to projected growth.
Yep. No, a great question through the mayor. Through my recollection of the determination of this growth forecast, the first items that was examined as background information for this is the county's OP and their growth forecast for yourselves. So that was the starting point as to looking at, what were their targets for you going out to 2033 to 2036. So that was the first point. And then subsequent to that, then we worked with staff to take a look at, developments in the pipeline, what you actually have in terms of active applications, applications that are, depending on the stage of the application, are they still at site plan or are they ready to pull a building permit? So we had to take a look at that, and all that information was then amalgamated to take a look at this, and that's what was presented to you today as that 2941, people or 1124 residential unit increase.
Thank you. Any other questions at this time, Deputy Mayor Lavoie?
Yeah, I just want to make a comment because we are a small municipality, and I think the idea that one large development that say just suddenly arose could really upset things, whereas you get that sort of thing in a city like Ottawa or Hamilton or Toronto. They've got a large base on which to absorb changes. So if variance occurs, we are vulnerable. So I think what we're trying to reflect in these comments is just to mitigate that risk where it can be foreseen to what extent it can be. So in any case, and that's why I think the growth numbers is an important one to just maybe find a way, as you indicated, to blend or segregate the actual bylaws so that we don't end up, discounting an extra 10% inadvertently because we have to amend the bylaw.
No, thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. Very good comment, because there are potential opportunities that could fluctuate numbers significantly depending what happens in the horizon. So any further questions or comments for Byron at this time? Seeing none. Byron, thank you very much. Very in-depth and informative presentation. Much appreciate you taking time to walk us through it. And we look forward to seeing you again as you further educate us on all this stuff that we don't know when we first came here. That's for sure. So, Madam Clerk, may I have a motion to receive Mr. Tan's presentation, please?
Moved by Clark, seconded by Shell. Be it resolved that the presentation provided by Byron Tan, Manager, Watson and Associates Economists Limited, re 2024 Development Charges Council Workshop be received, and that staff and Watson and Associates Economists Limited proceed as outlined.
All in favor? That is received. And once again, Byron, thank you very much for your amazing report, and look forward to talking to you again.
It was my pleasure. Thank you very much, members of council, and we'll be chatting soon.
Thank you. Okay, so we're on to identifications from the public of an agenda item of interest. Has anyone identified that something that needs to be moved forward, Madam Clerk?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Open forum, do we have anyone registered to speak at open forum?
No, there were no registrations received.
Okay, and I don't see if anyone in chamber who would like to speak at open forum, so we will move forward to reports of municipal officers. May we have a motion for item 11A, Madam Clerk?
Moved by Shell, seconded by Young. Be it resolved, one, that FI 2024-01, Nellie Morrow, Director Finance, Chief Financial Officer, re 2024 Interim Tax Levy, Penalties and Interest be received and adopted. Two, that the draft bylaw to levy amounts on the assessment of property in the local municipality rateable for local municipality purposes per the Municipal Act 2001 SO 2001, Chapter 25 S13 be brought forward for Council's consideration.
Members of council, the floor is open for any questions or discussions. Everything? Seeing none. Any comments with respect to the draft motion? None? Then I'll call the vote. All in favor? That is passed. Great job, Nellie. May we have a motion for item 11B?
Moved by Lavoie, seconded by Hutchison. Be it resolved that FY 2024-02 Nellie Morrow, Director of Finance, Chief Financial Officer, Reinvestment Activity be received and adopted. 2, that the Director of Finance, Chief Financial Officer execute the recommended 2024 investment plan. 3, that the Director of Finance, Chief Financial Officer execute a request for investment services to enable the township to engage with financial experts to maximize investment strategies.
Thank you very much. Very important item. I'll open the floor for discussion from members of council at this time, or any questions. Councillor Hutchinson.
Thank you, Mayor Greenlaw, through you. to Nellie, thank you very much for your reports, first of all, and for answering a number of questions that I had asked of you with regard to this. So I'm sure everybody's had a chance to have a look at the numbers, and I am in full support of looking at getting advice provided to us through some other investment advisors as to what we can be doing with these funds. When I look at the portfolio as it is, it's pretty bread and butter, which is fine, and we need to stay within perimeters as a municipality as we're guided to, but there are definitely different options for us to be looking at. And I would say in particular what we want to do is we want to make sure that we are doing a comparison between providers, because looking at the portfolio as we have it now, and from my previous work experience, the investment advisors would be receiving a fairly good commission from even something as vanilla as a GIC. Therefore, if you were looking at getting competing offers from different FIs, then they will start to look at how they can reduce their slice of that pie, which means we get more in return from the for our investments. So one question I had for you is what would the total investable dollar amount we be looking at for 2024?
Through, excuse me, through you, Mr. Mayor, and to you, Councillor. Currently, I am looking at, in my plan that I provided you, those are the full dollars that we would like to invest would be what is currently included in our one investment, and those that we have currently with RBCDS, which we have on that schedule. That is what I would be moving forward in my service request to other financial institutions to see what they have as a possible portfolio for us to invest both short-term and long-term in order to facilitate that we have enough funds to cover our current projects, capital projects, and operating needs.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. There's definitely some leverage in the amount available to invest. So I'm really interested to see what you come up with. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hutchison. I appreciate your background and expertise. To, you know, it's always great to have an extra set of eyes and input. Definitely. Any other questions, Deputy Mayor Lavoie?
Yes, and I think if we're going to be going out and looking a bit, at least, and perhaps this is not something for this year, but I do notice that in the report there is the option called joint municipal investment pools. And, you know, we, again, to go back on the issue that we are relatively small, I think pooling money with other municipalities, if we're not doing that, I don't know that whether we are or aren't, might be helpful in terms of leveraging the sorts of opportunities that Councillor Hutchison is referring to with regard to, you know, better rates, lower fees. You know, when you get into the hundreds of millions of dollars, perhaps, there's certainly a lot more opportunity and a lot more management of those funds. So just a comment by way of perhaps an opportunity, not this year, but maybe next. Thank you.
Ms. Morrow?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, to you, Councillor. Absolutely. One investment is a pooling of municipalities, and they do have alternative, I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of it right now, but there are other pools that we can join with them, and that will be part of my analysis.
Thank you. I believe, is AMO not provide a package like that as well for the municipalities?
No, I'm sorry, One Investment is the one that is for municipality shared pools.
Okay, that's it. Okay, thank you. Any other questions regarding this? Great comments, and thank you very much, Ms. Morrow, for the presentation and the information. I appreciate all your work on this. So I will, Madam Clerk, have we had the motion read?
Yes.
I'll call the vote. All in favor? And that is carried. May we have a motion for item 11C, please, Madam Clerk?
Moved by Hutchison, seconded by Young, be it resolved that 1DS 2024-04 Andy Karaskakis, Manager Planning Services, re-consultation on potential revocation of Minister's Zoning Order, Ontario Regulation 60920 be received and adopted. 2, that Council authorize planning staff to make a submission to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing based on the comments as outlined in DS 2024-04 through the Environmental Registry of Ontario 019-7996 as the Township's submission on the Ministry's consultation on potential revocation of Minister's Zoning Order, Ontario Regulation 609/20, in addition to any other comments received by Council.
Thank you very much. I'll open the floor for any questions or comments regarding this. Deputy Mayor Lavoie.
My apologies. Yeah, I don't know if I wouldn't prefer a stronger recommendation in the report to indicate that we are requesting that the MZO get revoked or be revoked, or some words to that nature. Thank you.
Thank you. No, and then I guess, Madam Clerk, we may look at that. I know this was announced in November. We have not heard anything from the property owner as to they've not reached out to request some support or bring us any more light as to what their plans are. And I don't know if CAO Dunn, would you have any update in regards to the owner of that property?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. If I could defer to Mr. Spagnol and Mr. Karaskakis, both Brent and Andy are online, Mr. Mayor, and I'm certain Mr. Karaskakis and Mr. Spagnol would be able to provide some additional insight to council.
Okay. Mr. Spagnol or Mr. Karaskakis, whoever would like to maybe comment on that, that'd be greatly appreciated.
Thank you, Mayor Greenlaw. To my understanding, the property owner has not been in contact with the municipality regarding the letter, but I would defer over to Mr. Karaskakis just to confirm that, as this is his report. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that is correct. There's been no communication and no correspondence received by the property owner regarding the minister's consultation on the potential revocation of the MZO on the subject property.
Okay, thank you very much. So I think the thing that it's unfortunate because I really would like to see development and stuff brought into this township to help with our tax base. But this MZO is very narrow in scope and specific as to what it was issued for. And it was issued I believe the province cleared it in October of 2020. And we are now into 2024. So it's been 3 years, and if I misstate Mr. Karaskakis or Mr. Spagnol, there has been no application or site or land alteration submitted to the township. And I don't believe there is some environmentally sensitive lands there, and there's been no application submitted to the Lake Simcoe Conservation Authority. So I'm not sure what the challenges are. And unfortunately, as to what the MZO is laid out for, I think that market's either become saturated with manufacturers and product. I think we need to move on this if possible. So, CAO Dunn and Madam Clerk, is there a way that you would suggest the wording at the deputy's request to be firmed up to be a little more concise? As I think potentially, I don't want to put words in your mouth, Deputy, but I think you're saying is that we support the province if they choose after review to remove the MZO, and I guess it would result in the lands being turned back to agricultural.
And Mr. Mayor, if I could, could you table this for a moment and drive on with the other pieces of business? There's a few more.
Yeah.
Afford the deputy and I an opportunity to refine. Certainly, Mr. Karaskakis's draft recommendation in his report was, what I understand, not quite there from the deputy's perspective. Give us a cycle, please, Mr. Mayor. Deputy, if we could just have this tabled for a moment, drive on, and then come back and pick it up with a revised resolution that is more fitting with the direction of council.
Okay, so we'll just come back later in the meeting. We'll just continue to drive. Well, let me ask. I will give this option to council at this time. If anyone would like to take a break for 5 to 10 minutes to do what you do. So I'm trying to be leaving that pretty open option. So okay. So Madam Clerk, we'll recess for 10 minutes, and then we'll re-adjourn.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Everyone turn their camera on and we're good.
Mr. Mayor, we're live.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. Could we have the revised motion, please?
Certainly. If there is a mover, I put as the deputy mayor, and a seconder, and I can.
Councillor Clark.
Clark, thank you. Moved by Lavoie, seconded by Clark. Be it resolved, one, that DS 2024-04 Andy Karaskakis, Manager Planning Services, consultation on potential revocation of Minister's Zoning Order, Ontario Regulation 609/20 be received. Two, that council direct planning staff to make a submission to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing based on the comments as outlined in DS 2024-04 through the Environmental Registry of Ontario 019-7996 as the township's submission on the ministry's consultation on potential revocation of Minister's Zoning Order Ontario Regulation 609/20 to support the revocation of the MZO as it applies to the subject property.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Clerk. Are there any comments with respect to the revised draft motion? Everyone's fine with that? So I'll call the vote. All in favor? And that is carried. Okay, so there are no reports of municipal officers for information only. Reports of members of council. Are there any updates from members of council as to township representatives with our partner agencies? I take it everyone had a good break. I guess I would ask the Oro-Medonte Chambers of Commerce and Tourism, how did the mystical lights go? Did just a lot of work, a ton of work put on by a lot of volunteers, and I commend all the volunteers that helped put that together. I know the weather didn't always cooperate, but is there anything you could just briefly update?
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. Councillor Shell spent way more hours and days, I guess, in total out there than I did. But the days that I was out there, it was customers were happy, kids were excited. I actually was out there on a day where there was snow and the horses were there. It was a wonderful event, and I think the location was good. So thank you to the people from Heidi's and all the people that put that together. But Councillor Shell could probably speak more to that, but I think it was a success.
Would you? I have to applaud Councillor Shell. He put a tremendous amount of hours, likely more than anybody else in the township. But thank you very much for doing what you did, and you're, take it with positivity. You're a great, jolly old fellow, and. So I know when I went through, I really enjoyed it, and the hours you put in was phenomenal. It was a great event, and I think people. I've been a part before, but the hours that it takes to get everything organized and put together is amazing, and I do thank the chamber for putting that together. Councillor Shell, would you like to add anything?
Oh, yeah. No, thanks. Santa had fun. And everybody else came and had fun. Tim Hortons provided free hot chocolate for everybody. It was awesome, well received. Look forward to another year of next year, putting in some more social hours to help them put it back together again, and looking for some more volunteers as well.
Yeah, well,
thanks.
Perfect. No, and also Heidi's, I heard nothing but praise of how amazing they were as a host of the event. So well done by the chamber, and well done by all those that were involved. Deputy Mayor Lavoie.
Yes, thank you very much. I did want to mention that the TAPMO, the Top Aggregate Producing Municipalities of Ontario, held a committee board meeting just very early in the year. There are substantial concerns with the represented municipalities with regard to the taking of aggregate and the taking of water in those townships. And I just want to make an announcement, just to let the public know that the committee does have two delegations, one with the Ministry of Natural Resources and another one with the Ministry of Finance at the Roma conference beginning on January 21st. And I would invite any of the citizens who have concerns with this regard to send me their comments in advance of that, so I can take them with me to that delegation along with the other committee members. And I know you've been communicating with me from time to time via email, and now would be a good time to send any other concerns that you might have, even as regards to traffic concerns regarding aggregate haulage and other things that, generally speaking, we can put on the radar, because I think with the expectations of building 1.5 million homes and putting in a Bradford bypass, and other highway expansions, there's going to be a lot of aggregate taken in the next 3 to 4 years. And we need the ministries to be more responsible, and the aggregate producers to be more responsible. So those are my comments. Thank you.
No, perfect. Thank you very much. No, and we can tell by the amount of aggregate trucks that are going up and down Highway 11 all day and into the evening. It's substantial. So, any other comments from agencies or partners? Seeing none, we'll go to 13B. May we have a motion for 13B, Madam Clerk?
Moved by Lavoie, seconded by Young. Be it resolved that 1, the correspondence presented by Mayor Greenlaw and Deputy Mayor Lavoie, Reid County of Simcoe Committee of the Whole Report, CCW 2024-019, County of Simcoe Regional Review Submission to Provincial Standing Committee be received. 2, that Mayor Greenlaw and Deputy Mayor Lavoie be authorized to represent council in making a submission to the Standing Committee on Heritage, Infrastructure, and Cultural Policy that confirms the Township of Oro-Medonte's position.
Thank you. So I will start off, and I know Deputy Mayor Lavoie will add more color. But at this week's County Council, there was a motion to come forward for permission for Warden Basil Clark to go forward the Standing Committee on Heritage, Infrastructure, and Cultural Policy. So the message is, what he wants is, rather than all the municipalities having to individually go before the Standing Committee, is that they come to county where all municipalities can voice their opinions in a more productive and efficient manner. And it's to do with the message that how county can best service us and how we are stronger together as a group of municipalities in approaching it, because we're being faced with a lot of rapid growth and change, and so we will. In what's happened, we finally got approval, Oro-Medonte, to go before the committee next Tuesday to present. We did apply, and our application is in order to give our position on the City of Barrie going before the committee when they went before the committee on November 3rd, and about the land annexation piece that they've presented as a partnership. And we just want to clarify and give our position clearly. So we will be going to Ajax next Tuesday, present our case before the Standing Committee. But also county is asking the Standing Committee to come to them, where they can deal with 16 different municipalities all at once. So Deputy Mayor Lavoie, if you'd like to add anything.
Yeah, I do have a couple of comments. So just with regard to the calendar and this chain of events, so county is making a presentation before the committee on January 17th in Vaughan. The day after, the township, that's myself and the mayor, make a presentation to the same committee on January 16th in Ajax. There is a scheduled slot for Simcoe County, but its date is not prescribed. So that's why both parties, ourselves and the county, have elected to go to these communities to make those presentations, because we don't want to miss the opportunity to do so. In addition to that, Simcoe County, Springwater Township, and Oro-Medonte Township do have a meeting with Minister Calandra on January 18th in Toronto in their offices. So we will be at that point in time undertaking to describe what the three municipal parties see as both the governance aspect and the knock-on effects of Barrie's proposed expansions into the neighboring townships. We are very actively preparing for those presentations, so I can't be too descriptive about what we are going to say. However, the mayor and I did attend a Ward 1 in Barrie presentation this Monday night, wherein Barrie described to their residents or gave their residents the opportunity to question them on their presentation with regard to the expansion into Springwater and Oro-Medonte. This was quite well attended. I'd say a couple hundred people at least. I'd say reception for the concept was not great in terms of what Barrie was proposing. And Barrie proposed this a land deal on the basic premise that they didn't have the money to expand to the south, so they were going to expand to the north. And I think ultimately Oro-Medonte cannot be the party that subsidizes another municipality for their lack of funds to be able to undertake the development that they need to take to reach the lands that they already own and lands that are so zoned for the purpose of which they want to annex a neighboring municipality. So those are my preliminary comments on it, and I presume for the most part that's the thrust of the message that we will be delivering. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other comments or seeing none? Just to close off on the deputy's comments, I think at the end of the day, each municipality elects people to act in the best interest of their constituents. And I hold no ill towards Barrie for what they've proposed. I just don't feel, nor does the deputy, and I know this council listened to Mayor Nuttall's presentation in chamber. It's not a win-win situation from our perspective at this time. So, you know, respecting, he's trying to do the best on behalf of the people who elected him to office, but we also have to act in the best interest of this township, not just for today, but for years to come. And I don't think what's been proposed represents responsible and good planning, and is not the best sustainable solution, because there is initially it looks great that, yeah, it's cheaper than going south, but there's a lot of upgrades that would have to happen to the roadway, the transportation system, and that would have to be incurred that really, I don't think all the research has been done to the detail, because questions came up at the meeting that they really couldn't give the factual data that would have answered questions. So wish us the best, and I know we will prevail, because you know, I think we're doing the right thing. So, Madam Clerk, we've had the motion, so I'll call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. So announcements. Are there any announcements from members of council that they'd like to make at this time? Councillor Hutchison.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Greenlaw. Just wanted to announce that the Friends of Sugarbush, they host a toboggan competition race every Family Day weekend, which is just becoming more and more popular. It's a fantastic event. And currently they are looking for business sponsors. So if you can contact the Friends of Sugarbush through their Facebook page, they would be grateful for any support that they can have to make that event happen again this year. And I don't know if this is my place, but I do know that the Oro-Medonte Citizen of the Year nominations are now open through the township website. So I'd encourage anybody to look at what the outline would be for that, and if they have a citizen that they feel deserves this award, they should fill out the nomination and go through the process.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hutchison. Councillor Bard.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. Just want to announce that the sorry, I should know this. I think it's the third annual Braystone Winter Classic is February 2nd, and with this year's goal of $130,000 to raise for the Simcoe Muskoka Regional Cancer Center at RVH. And it looks like they're well on their way, so please consider participating or sponsoring people and getting involved. So it's participated last year, and it was quite the event, and it was a lot of fun, and they met their goal last year, which was a little lower, and they've upped their game, and I think they're going to do it again. But thank you.
Perfect, thank you. Councillor Young.
Yeah, just for clarification, question to Councillor Hutchison. This toboggan race, is this the same one that where the mayor went into the crowd of people with his toboggan?
Through you, Mayor Greenlaw. Crash Greenlaw, to you, Robert Young. Yes.
Yes, thank you for that reminder. So anyways, a lot of great community events coming up, so I encourage everyone to get out and partake in them. It makes the winter go by that much quicker when you get out and enjoy the fresh air. Okay, so there's consent agenda. May we, oh, sorry, my apologies. It was okay, sure. Okay. Item 15, consent agenda. Is there anything member of council wish to pull from the consent agenda? Seeing none, then can we have a motion for the consent agenda to receive, please?
Moved by Bard, seconded by Clark. Be it resolved that the staff recommendations with respect to the items listed under consent agenda correspondence be adopted as printed.
All in favor? That is received. Just one thing, and I apologize, I know I'm jumping back, but I should announce that the Lake Simcoe Regional Conservation Authority will be hosting their AGM on the 26th in Newmarket, and it's their annual AGM. So they are in the consent agenda, but I think it's important that you have that marked in your calendar. Communications and petitions, there's none. So there is a notice of motion by Councillor Hutchison. This is a notice only and will be discussed and considered, but Councillor Hutchison, would you like to speak to this now and just give a brief overview of your motion coming forward?
Thank you, Mayor Greenlaw. Thank you for the opportunity. Yes, I felt it was important that we start to address the concern that I've heard from many constituents, which is the preservation of our tree canopy. In particular, we're sitting on a very sensitive moraine and recharge areas within Oro-Medonte. And we've seen some activity recently that's been concerning, and in the past with regard to developers preparing lands for their subdivisions. So I've asked for this notice of motion for a report to come back for us to review, considering a tree cutting bylaw for Oro-Medonte, as we do not have one at this time. And I've been doing a bit of research on this, and there has been some very successful implementations of these types of bylaws where a township and developers are working well in concert to ensure that the developer is not being hampered, but at the same time, the preservation of the trees is part of the deal. So I'm looking forward to seeing what report comes back from planning. I've had some good discussions with the planning department on this already, and I do think that this is very important for us to move forward on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hutchison, and I will just add to that is this is very important. This comes up every term of council, and people wonder why we don't have a canopy bylaw in place as acting as good stewards of this township and land. What we have is very special, and it's important that we protect it and take steps to ensure that we preserve it. May we have a motion for the draft bylaw under item 18, Madam Clerk?
Moved by Young, seconded by Lavoie. Be it resolved that bylaw number 2024-003 be read a first, second, and third time, passed, be engrossed by the deputy clerk, signed and sealed by the mayor.
Any questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor? And that is carried. There are no unfinished closed session items. May we have a confirmation bylaw, please?
Moved by Clark, seconded by Bard. Be it resolved that bylaw number 2024-004, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the council meeting held on Wednesday, January 10, 2024, be read a first, second, and third time, passed, be engrossed by the deputy clerk, signed and sealed by the mayor.
All in favor? That is carried. And may we have a motion to adjourn?
Moved by Lavoie, seconded by Shell. Be it resolved that we do now adjourn at 6:02 p.m.
Thank you. All in favor? Sorry, that is carried, and thank you for attending, and I look forward to a great 2024, and we're off to a good start.